Welcome to the Kitchen Review, and this is where we cover criminal cases and criminal theory. I'm your host, Jason Colvin, and let's get into it. Who was the Iceman? Richard Kuklinski had a wife and 3 kids in the 60s. He was dubbed to be a normal businessman who worked some strange hours to support his family and get by. He was an ordinary man with a dark secret. He was the Iceman. This man had nothing to do with ice cream. Richard Kuklinski terrorized New Jersey and parts of New York, brutally murdering people for both sport and career. He was also known as the one-man army or the devil himself. He was a terrifying sight to see. 6'5" and 270 pounds. He was ginormous. When he was finally caught by the police, he was convicted of 4 murders and received 2 life sentences for these murders. But that's not what his claim to fame is. What made him infamous was how many people he has claimed to have killed. Better known as the Iceman, this man was connected to the mob and has claimed to have killed over 100 people. Now let's take a look at Kuklinski's violent childhood and upbringing. Born on April 11, 1935 in Jersey City, Kuklinski had it rough. Kuklinski and his older brother Florian were beat by their alcoholic father, who also abused their mother, who also abused Florian and Richard. His brother Florian was beaten to death by his father at the age of 7 while his father was in a drunken rage. In order to cover this up, Richard's parents said that Florian had fallen down the stairs. After the death of Florian, Richard's father abandoned the family and Richard's mother continued to beat him. And throughout his childhood, Kuklinski had a history of violence. He dropped out of school at grade 8, and as a child he was known to have mercilessly tortured animals in the local neighborhood for fun. And this included like tying 2 cats together, their tails together, and then tossing them over a clothesline to fight. At age 14, he actually committed his first murder. He ambushed a small local gang leader named Charlie Lane, and while not intentionally doing it, he beat him to death. And not only did he do that to the leader of the gang, he hunted down 6 other members of the gang and beat them with iron bars, all to near death. He was just brought up in an extremely aggressive and violent environment, and this was seen in his nature of him being an extremely violent child and dangerous as well. This violence in Kuklinski's childhood gave him a gateway into organized crime. How did he become involved in organized crime? Well, he actually worked in the film industry. And in the film industry, he began bootlegging pornographic films for the mafia. And while he was involved in the bootlegging of the films, he was in communication with the mafia so he could get their orders in and then get his money as well. He constructed his connections through this. He built connections with some infamous families, such as the Genovese, Gambino, and De Cavalcante organizations. When he was younger, before he was married, he was an enforcer and an intimidator for these families. And this meant he would just go around and collect debts, basically, or harass anybody that needed to be harassed in the eyes of the family. Over time, he kind of evolved from debt collection, and this went into narcotics, arms dealing, money laundering, and hijacking. After he was married, this is when he was hired as a hitman. Now, he was making a lot of money from this, and this is a positive reinforcement for Richard. At the prime of his career, he was making $50,000 a hit. His favorite method of killing was liquid cyanide. He didn't only kill those he was hired to as well. He sometimes would kill those who he bought product off of, just so there was no chance of anyone testifying against him. But none of this necessarily explains the nickname of the Iceman. He received his name, the Iceman, because he would freeze the bodies of his victims to throw off investigators once they found the bodies, so they would have a harder time figuring out time of death and methods of which they were killed. Not only that, but he would basically hide the physical evidence until he was ready to leave it in a space that could be found. Let's discuss a couple of the theories that could help explain the actions and behaviors of the Iceman and his development. Now, two theories that I've selected that I think could explain how he was developed in his childhood and his actions for later in life are social learning theory and psychological theories. Social learning theory states that if a person is exposed to more deviant morals, then they are more likely to take up these morals instead of conforming morals. They learned these morals because they were exposed to it. As discussed before, Kuklinski was exposed to the violence of his parents. He observed his parents trying to use violence to fix their problems, work through their frustrations and angers, so he took up on that as well. He didn't learn another way to do it. The acts he was committing were positive reinforcement to this as well. Like I referenced to earlier, $50,000 per hit that he completed was a positive reinforcement to Richard. And as discussed earlier as well, when he had killed Charlie Lane and beat up the other members of the gang, he said he had felt powerful and in control. He also mentioned the rush that came with overpowering the others. Now, the power, control, and the rush were all positive rewards for Richard, and then later on, the money was an additional positive reward. Psychoanalytic theory focuses on trauma and disturbance from childhood. Kuklinski clearly didn't have the best childhood, so this could be an accurate explanation of how his mind works. Criminal acts are normally negligent in this theory, but if the child has a poor relationship with their parents, it is theorized that they are more likely to have conflict within their mind. The mind is made up of three parts: the ID, the ego, and the superego. The ID controls instinctual impulses and aggressive instincts. The ego is the conscious and the rationale portion of the mind. And the superego is partly conscious as well, but this is where the morals are stored and developed. It's clear that Kuklinski had a poor development of his ego and superego, and an enhanced development of his ID, which is not normal. He had deviant morals and deviant rationality from what is considered conformity or norm. He had a dominant ID that had basically been nurtured throughout his youth instead of suppressed. Growing up in the temperamental and violent household that he did, it always put this part of the mind at the forefront because of the survival instincts that it controls. Now, some of the claims in this interview that Kuklinski makes actually show the impulsivity of his ID and some of the actions that he took part in.
Understand that you're an expert in the use of cyanide. How many times did you kill with it?
Quite a few.
What's the different ways you use cyanide?
You could put it in liquid form. You could, person could say, for instance, a person could be in a bar. You bunk into them possibly by mistake, or say you were intoxicated, spill a drink on them, and leave. Everybody just looks around, thinks you're drunk or that you just had an accident or something. And meanwhile, it's soaking through their clothes into their pores and into their system. And eventually, they'll die. I've been in a restaurant where we were eating and the guy went to the bathroom. And while he was in the bathroom, we put a little boost in his food. And he was rushed to the hospital after that. And he died. And they buried him.
Well, I don't think I'll be eating any restaurants alone anymore. Anyways, Richard Kuklinski came from a troubled childhood, and that could have been completely different for him if his parents had nurtured him and developed him in a more conforming, non-deviant manner. He can be described by social learning theories and psychological theories, and those could potentially explain how he became the Iceman. This could have led to several different endings for both him and the others that he interacted with. But anyways, that is the case of the Iceman, and here at the Kitchen Review, we thank you for watching and hope to see you next week.